US troops are among the last to leave among international forces. And while huge numbers of Afghans have been flown out, many who want to leave are stranded. This and the looming humanitarian crisis have set off a flurry of diplomatic moves. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will hold a virtual meeting with several allies, including Qatar and Turkey, while France and the UK will urge the UN Security Council to protect civilians and ensure a safe passage for those who want to escape. We have three correspondents covering all these developments in Afghanistan. Kristen Salumi is live at the United Nations to give us more details on what's being discussed there. For the latest on the ground in Kabul, we have Rob McBride standing by. But first, let's take you to Alan Fisher. He's at the White House to address that Pentagon briefing. So very clear there, the message which the Pentagon is trying to emphasize is that they've done a huge job when it comes to evacuations, right, Alan?
That's right. And John Kirby is saying, look, no one could have expected the Afghan government to collapse quite so quickly. There were people suggesting that that might happen. So there will be questions after this about whether or not there was a huge intelligence failure, as there was 20 years ago when Osama bin Laden coordinated the attacks in the United States on 9/11, which precipitated the US going into Afghanistan in the first place. What was interesting, of the 5 rockets that were launched at the airport overnight, only 1 landed, 1 was intercepted by the rocket system, 3 landed outside the airport. But this talk about how they are able to continue to target people even after the United States pulls out is what they've talked about for a long time, this over-the-horizon security capability to be able to still neutralise threats that they see. And I know from speaking to people over the last few hours that the Americans really want this operation to be done. They want to get to the deadline. They want all the American troops out. Every American who wants to leave, they want them out. They want to remove as many Afghans as they possibly can and do it without loss of life, because as we've seen, 13 lives lost at the end of last week and then a number of civilians killed as the Pentagon says it targeted what was potentially a car bomb in Kabul on Sunday. They really just want to wake up on Wednesday or Thursday morning and have the headache of processing all these people rather than have the headache of ending America's presence in Afghanistan after 20 years.
And kind of related to that, you and I were chatting before the show about the whole issue of counter-terrorism operations, security cooperation. That came up in the press briefing, didn't it, about what sort of, as the Americans are calling it, over-the-horizon counter-terrorism capabilities will be maintained and how much coordination will there be with the Taliban?
What is clear is that at the moment the realpolitik dictates that the Taliban's in charge of Afghanistan, they're in charge of Kabul, therefore the United States has to work closely with them to make sure that this operation continues as smoothly as possible. What happens in the future? Well, we have already heard from the Taliban, who condemned the attack that targeted the so-called spotter, the senior ISIL figure that was killed in a drone attack. And then they also condemned the attack on Sunday, which we believe may have killed innocent civilians. What is clear from speaking to some security people I know is that they don't think there will be sharing of intelligence with the Taliban. They say it's a complicated situation, but they believe that there is too much overlap between ISIL-K and the Taliban, even though the two groups are meant to be in opposition. There are still links between the two groups, and therefore the United States isn't going to flag anything up before it carries out an operation. If they think, in John Kirby's words, that there is a threat to the United States or to Americans emanating from Afghanistan, then they will act. They said that although the US and the war in Afghanistan, that's come to an end, what will not end is this commitment to continue to protect Americans. So it will be complicated. Excuse me. There may be discussions on a diplomatic level between the Taliban and the United States, but the idea of them sharing intelligence, according to the people I've been speaking to, seems far-fetched unless there is a common goal, unless there is something that the Taliban need dealt with or have highlighted and the United States believes it's also in its interest to take some action on that front. Then there may be some joint action, but from the people I've been speaking to say it's far too complicated to consider sharing any intelligence with the Taliban.
All right, good stuff there from Alan Fisher. Let's thank him for that. Let's head over now to Rob McBride. He joins us live from Kabul. And of course, we had those latest rocket attacks towards Kabul airport. What does the situation on the ground look like, or the aftermath of those attacks look like?
I think it is quite troubling for the Americans, probably more in psychological terms, as they're now into this end game of this evacuation exercise, because there seems to be little indication of actual harm or damage. But the US had warned specifically about a rocket attack as one of the continuing threats from this Islamic State affiliate. It seems to be prepared for that. It is deployed, as we've just heard in confirmation there, with more details from the Pentagon, this anti-rocket system that it has. It said it was successful intercepting several of the rockets as they came in, saying that just one of those rockets fell harmlessly, it says, in an open piece of land. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility. They say a total of 6 Katyushka-style rockets were fired, presumably from a vehicle which was seen to be on fire after this attack. But the evacuation exercise continues this Monday evening. All throughout the afternoon and into now the hours of darkness here, we have been watching from the end of the runway as these big C-17 transport planes have been lumbering off into the sky. And as they do, of course, we are counting down the hours now until the end of this exercise. The military contingent there, the American military contingent, is starting to reduce its footprint, ever smaller base within the airport, giving up positions to the Taliban in preparation for the very final flight. As we heard from the Pentagon there, they know exactly when that is going to be, but they are giving no indication of that. It is, as we know, sometime between now and this deadline of Tuesday midnight here local time.
All right, an important development. Is aid now being flown into the country?
That is an important development we've heard about this Monday, the confirmation of this aid flight, specifically by the World Health Organization, a flight into Mazar-e-Sharif in the north of the country. Now, in practical terms, this is very important for the WHO. They said last week that they were down to just 10 days of supplies for the whole of Afghanistan amid what is a worsening humanitarian crisis. It says that there were supplies in Dubai. It wanted to get into the country, and it seems to have found a way which does open the wider potential for air routes into Afghanistan. Mazar-e-Sharif is a big, important city in the north. It has a big, important airport. Before the collapse of the government, there were international flights there. So this is a confirmation that they have restored air traffic control, which does seem to pave the way or show the way forward for Kabul here, because, of course, once the US departs, they take with them air traffic control, and the Taliban will have the unenviable job of not only restoring airport, but restoring that air traffic control. So it does offer a way forward, which everybody here, it seems, wants to see. The government, the aid organizations, and most importantly, of course, the population, because that would then mean the return, eventually, of commercial flights.
All right, thanks so much, Rob McBride. Let's take this now to Kristen Salumi. She's joining us from the United Nations. There have been discussions there about Afghanistan. Where does the Security Council stand on getting a resolution out?
Well, we know that the United Kingdom and France have been pushing a resolution that we expect some action on later in the day that essentially calls for the continued safe passage of civilians and aid agencies in and out of Kabul. Worth noting that the Taliban has said that civilians will be able to come and go as they please. This essentially puts it in writing, lets the Taliban know that the international community plans to hold them to that commitment by enshrining it in international law. The resolution also, I think, attempts to put the focus back on the humanitarian situation in the country, with so much attention on people trying to leave Afghanistan. UN officials have been warning that the situation on the ground is increasingly dire. There was concern about medical supplies running out. Earlier today, WHO, the World Health Organization, got its first flight into the country since the Taliban takeover, bringing much-needed medical supplies and health-related supplies into the country, some 12.5 metric tons that are expected to be delivered to 29 different provinces and health centers. But that flight had to land in Mazar-e-Sharif. It could not land in Kabul because of the terrible security situation there. So UN officials are warning that there are some 3.5 million displaced people inside Afghanistan, about 500,000 of those happening in the last year. And they're warning that the situation on the ground is just going to get worse after the United States withdrawal. So this resolution we do expect to be voted on in the coming hours, and the hope there that the Taliban will see that the world is watching and that this will make a difference going forward.
All right. Thanks so much, Kristen Salumi.